some of you set your own. And also Steve Bell. Steve? Over here. There you are. Okay, for our sound system. Thanks a lot, Steve. We also have a guest timekeeper tonight. I found him at the pub up in just a little while ago. No, seriously, our world famous spelunker and incredible timekeeper, Phil Whitfield. Phil, would you identify yourself to the candidates? Because they're going to be looking for you. This thing is going to be run. I don't know. Can I say something? Fascist? I don't know. Anyway, we're going to try and keep a tight timeline on people's questions and answers. So Steve will be keeping time. And I don't know, at some point, 30 seconds before, right, okay, the hammer comes down. Look to Steve and he'll give you a signal. Okay. Bill? Okay. And Bill, really, I'm here. Okay, I was tonight. But he'll give you a signal. And when I start twitching, and you can finish up. So, okay, that's the way we'll do it. Same for when you ask questions later on. They will have time limits. But I think almost all of you have been here before and done this, and this should be a really good meeting. I would like to say we drew random table assignments here. You notice that there are two candidates who have withdrawn officially. Is that right, Jan? Okay. As of today, Troy Zepik, Independent, and Ash Dillon have both withdrawn on their ways. So we're down to 4 candidates for this riding. And right now, Blair Fisher from the Green Party is not here at this time. So we had a seat for her, and if she shows up, we've got a seat for her. But in the meantime, thank you for all of you for being here. As I don't know, if they would have it for my sense of humor, I'd like to introduce, and if you could please hold your applause for the candidates until I introduce all 3 of them. Would be really nice. On my left, as it turns out, is our conservative candidate, Scott Anderson. Okay. And on my right, my far right, is our Liberal candidate, Anna Sears. I know you're holding your applause. And firmly in the middle, as always. This, I think, you're all here because this is another of those things that will be called a very important election. And I know we talk about our federal leaders and what the parties stand for, but this is a really good opportunity for us tonight to realize that the people we're voting for are these people. Okay? And I'm sure you'll pay much attention to what they have to say and what questions they answer and what, how they match up with all our particular views and how you want to vote. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. We're going to start out with the candidates. Each candidate, you can either stand up or come up here or hit the table wherever you'd like to be. You have a microphone. Each candidate is going to have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. And we'll start from there. We're going to try and spend as much time as possible to have an open line for questions, okay, from you afterwards. And so we can get some to and froing with the candidates. All right? So to begin with, okay, I'd like to turn the mic over to the Liberal candidate, Anna Sears. Okay, Anna, it's all yours.
It's working?
Yeah. You can kind of keep this out.
Just lean into it.
No problem. Okay. Thank you for inviting me. It is wonderful to be here. I only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to dive right in. I decided to run for office here because I'm extremely concerned about Canadian sovereignty. I'm extremely concerned about Canadian independence and about the threat from the United States. And I believe that Mark Carney is our best and only hope as a leader in these challenging times. And I think as Canada stands to the occasion and stands together in a unified force, we'll be best able to address these threats. I grew up in Caslow. I have a friend here from Caslow Elementary School. And I went to, I graduated from high school in Argenta. I have a friend here from Argenta. I was a carpenter in my 20s, and then I had an opportunity to go to university where I became a biologist. And I moved to Vernon when, in 2006, when I took the job as the leader of the Okanagan Basin Water Board, which is a partnership of Okanagan local governments and Okanagan Indian bands, and it is based on finding collaborative solutions to the kind of water problems, pretty much any kind of water problem that you have. I can't tell what his symbols are. He's waving at me.
You have 11 seconds.
Uh-oh. My philosophy is that we all have the most important things in life we all have in common, and it is through collaboration that we can get through political differences. And is that my noise? Okay, now you guys know what it's going to be like.
Everybody knows how fast that goes by. Okay, next is our NDP candidate, Leah May.
Greetings. I would like to offer thanks to the Sinites, on whose land, unceded traditional territories we are meeting tonight. I moved to the Slocan Valley in 1971. Me and my partner, Michael Dorsey, raised our blended family here. There have been hard times. There have been wonderful times. We have all, in our communities and in our broader Slocan Valley, up to the cusp community, we have all learned how to survive in this little pocket of the world, whatever they throw at us, including putting us with a riding that is across the Great Divide, over a ferry ride and 2 mountain ranges. I spent last week in Vernon. I'm going to try to bring the two together. Many of us were evacuated last year. We learned how to survive, and now we're learning how to thrive. We're learning how to prepare for the unexpected by building strong communities and by cooperating and collaborating with people who have different points of view than we have. We all have friends who are conservatives, friends who are liberals, friends who are Greens, friends who have other points of view. And I think it's really, really, really important at this moment in history that we do not buy into a two-party system. It is important that the third, fourth, and fifth voices be heard, be sent to Parliament, and represent the diversity that we have of how to live, how to survive, how to get better and better, and how to honor our communities, our ancestors, our generations to come. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm running. Thank you.
Leah May. Now speaking for the Conservative Party, I'd like to introduce Scott Anderson. Scott.
Hi, and thank you all so much for coming tonight. Democracy is so important, and I'm glad to see so many people here tonight. For those who don't know me, I'm Scott Anderson. I'm a businessman, a 2-term Vernon City Councillor, and I'm a small business owner and a veteran. Canada is at a crossroads right now. We've had 10 years of high taxation, high spending, and a regulatory stranglehold on our economy. That's why so many of us are hurting right now. The Liberals would like you to believe that you should have another 4 years of it. And they say that they've got a new leader and that the new leader is now because the new leader is here, it's going to be a different situation. The problem is that the new leader is actually handpicked by Justin Trudeau, and he's the architect of the debt that actually brought down the Trudeau government. As for the United States, we didn't ask for these unfair tariffs. We don't want them. What we want is free trade. If we have to respond to them with tariffs, we certainly will. Number one, Canada's sovereignty is not for sale. It never will be. And I'm standing firmly for Canada, as is the Conservative Party of Canada. We can't control what the United States does. There's no way we can control it. The only thing we can control is what we do and how we respond. What I want to do, what the Conservative Party will do, is reverse the trend. We will actually stimulate the economy, supercharge the economy, open responsible resource development, cut back on wasteful spending, and cut through the red tape. In fact, we've got the policies to do it. Cut 25% off. Is that the
Thank you very much. As you can see, 2 minutes is hardly time to do more than just introduce ourselves. But we now get to the part where you can learn more about the candidates by asking them your questions. There's a microphone right up here that's all set up, and I'd ask people to come up, and we'll just go down the line. There are a few rules, the usual rules that we have here, which is please ask the question of the candidates. We're trying to learn about them. So we don't need a lot of introductory remarks. We just don't have time for it. Okay, so ask your question, and you can ask any candidate you want or all of them. Okay, and we'll make sure that they give a reply. The person you ask a specific question to will get 2 minutes to reply. Other candidates will get 1 minute to make remarks on those two. So everybody will get to respond to any question that comes from the floor. Okay, to a greater or lesser extent. Okay, so
How would you
people a chance.
confuse President? I thought we were all going to answer for 2 minutes.
It's fair, I think, to the people here. Some of them have a specific question for a specific candidate. So if that's okay with you, what we'd like to do is, if you want to address a particular candidate, ask them, they get 2 minutes, the other candidates get 1. Okay, and we hope it'll work out fairly along the way.
If the question is for all of them, do we each get 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you didn't miss it. I didn't say that. Okay. Thank you very much for the comment. Okay, is it clear? And everybody gets 1 question, and then we'll circle the line. Last time, I have to say, there was one person who was really good. Yes, as soon as that person asked a question, they turned around and immediately got back in line. So they next in line. And I can't allow that. Okay, if there's something behind your head that's spoken yet, we'll put this in the note first. Okay, that's all fair. They'll prevent a lot of traffic congestion. Okay, so please, the mic is open. And if you could introduce yourself by name when you start, and the candidates will know.
My name is Marcy, and the first question I want to ask, that I didn't plan to ask, but since you said it, you had mentioned that everyone, was fearful of the threat of the United States. I want to ask you, what about the threats we've dealt with for the last 10 years from our own government? Because those are very scary and real to those of us with young families. How are you guys going to change that when it's the same, more of the same?
Yeah, this is a question
For Anna. Sorry, Anna. I'm sorry. For Anna. Thank you.
I could tell she was looking at me.
Do I wait here or should I sit down?
Thank you.
Whatever you choose.
Thank you.
For me, from my experience, The most important thing to me is Canadian independence. We have the ability, if we are an independent sovereign country, we have the ability to deal with our internal questions, with our internal problems. This is something that's come up, interestingly, with Quebec and with many Indigenous nations right now who are coming to stand behind Mark Carney because they believe that within Canada, within all of the problems that we have, all the arguments and all the difficulties that we have, all the things that we're trying to work through internally as a country, we need to work through those problems ourselves. We need to work through those problems ourselves without any foreign interference. So whether it is working on economic issues, whether it's working on different needs and rights of families, whether it is looking at maintaining universal health care, or whatever it is that we have between us, all these different policy things, that's ours to work on. That's ours to work on without someone from another country telling us what to do and who to trade with and what to invest in and trying to get us to be compliant through process of trade war. So I believe the most important thing is Canada for Canadians, and a lot of the other questions that we have that come up that are policy differences, many of the things that the Conservative Party candidate said is also things that the Liberal Party would like to see. Cutting through red tape, protecting our national defense, many things. We have many things in common. All the parties have many things in common. But the important thing is that we get to work on them. And if we're squabbling about the differences when we have this threat coming from the south, it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And that's my view.
Thank you. And you have a minute?
Sure, I have a minute. Yes, the threat from the south overshadows a lot of things. Keep in mind that Canada's economy is the healthiest of the G7 nations. Canada's economy is functioning in a global market that is struggling. We are not the only country that is struggling. The NDP believes that through all those struggles, we have to help each other, we have to help our communities, we have to help our families, and we have to help workers, not just the corporations. So yes, there's a lot of red tape. Some of that red tape is perhaps unnecessary, but most of it protects us from going too far in a calamitous fashion. It protects us by keeping food safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. Scott?
Thank you very much. We can talk about sovereignty. I don't think there's anybody sitting at this table that doesn't believe that Canada should be a sovereign nation. Nobody's talking about joining the United States except one person in the United States. And that changes weekly. So, I mean, this is not something that if we dwell on sovereignty, I don't really think it's an issue. And if it becomes an issue, then as a former soldier, I'll be the first one to protect it. That is not the issue. My colleague said that we all want to cut red tape and that we all want to build up the military. The problem is that the Liberal Party put the red tape there in the first place. And the Liberal Party is actually known in the military as the lost decade because nothing has happened with the military except for social services. The Conservative Party definitely, I mean, its ethos is to have smaller government, to cut red tape, to streamline the economy.
Thank you, Scott. And it's nice. We don't always get our questions exactly answered, but sometimes they all did, and that's great. I'm just warning you ahead of time that they aren't always answered, but that also says something. Of course, you recognize that. Our next speaker.
All right, good morning. What I would like to ask you people, if you're elected, is to go to the media and make them tell us the truth. Because we live in a democracy, we have to make informed decisions, and they lie to us steady. Two classic examples of that. One is Netanyahu started that war. When it first happened on October 7th, Netanyahu and CTV News made it very clear to every Canadian exactly what happened and why it happened and what it led to.
Yeah, and excuse me, we were talking just before the meeting started, okay? And you have to ask the question.
Well, that's the question. This is what I'm asking it.
Okay, so the question is what?
Things are misrepresented.
Would you tell the truth if you're elected? Is that your question?
No, can we go after the media so that if we catch them telling a lie and can prove it, we get $100,000 reward? The person presenting it gets a $100,000 fine. The CEO of the media corporation gets $1 million fine, and the corporation gets a $10 million fine. Because otherwise, we're going to be continued to be lied to, and it goes on and on in all different factions. We have to
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ed. Ed is our social conscience here. Okay, so question is, would you support something like that?
Well, I think it would definitely stimulate the economy. But I agree that democracy dies in darkness, and that phrase is all about maintaining a free press where people can exchange ideas with freedom of speech and communicate with each other across all different mediums. So I think you're absolutely right. This is one reason why I personally am pleased that the Kearney government is for increasing the funding and stability to the CBC. And we're in a situation where most of our major media outlets are owned by just a few corporations, and there are less and less small papers like the Valley Voice. And I think if we can all find ways to increase the viability of our small town newspapers, as well as reduce the corporatization of our larger newspapers, we would all be a healthier, better country. Thank you.
Sure. You asked if the government would police that. I can't think of anything worse than a media controlled by the government. Yeah. Which is why I want to cut funding to the CBC, because the CBC I think it has essentially become an arm of the Liberal Party. That goes in very oblique ways. I think that I agree. Once upon a time the media was open, it reported the news just the way it is. They didn't take positions. Since then, it's segmented into left and right, and I agree that is a phenomenon that is not helpful to democracy because it cherry picks information and puts it aside. I think we need to encourage the media to become less ideological and much more factual. But I don't think the CBC represents that.
Yeah. I'm happy to reclaim the CBC. The only way democracy functions is if the citizens have information, have data, have reportage, and there has never been a time when the media, newspapers, were fully neutral. Do you know the word editorial? They all have a point of view. The situation that Anna referred to in Canada, where most of the media is owned by 3 people. And by most of the media, I don't mean just television, or just newspapers, or just magazines, or just radio stations. They are owned wholly, every single piece of the media. This is not a good situation, and we would start by breaking up those monopolies so that community newspapers, regional news reporting could thrive again, and so that all of us would have reliable information. And that includes from the CBC, it includes from the Global TV, it includes from CTV News, it includes from Black Press, and it includes from every non-monopolized piece of the media that can give us information so that we can make informed decisions.
John Frank from New Denver, and this is a question for all the candidates. Here in the Columbia River Basin, the President for the United States has canceled the Columbia River Treaty negotiations. The question would be, if you were elected, you and your government would take what steps to defend the Columbia River Treaty, as well as the international shores or national shores north and east and west. So the question is, what would you do basically with the Columbia River Treaty first, and then with international waters second?
Thank you, John. Good question. We're going to start with the NDP candidate, Rhea, in the middle on this. International waters.
Thank you. I might be standing in the middle, but my positions are rarely in the middle. The Columbia River Treaty is very important. The negotiations for the renewal of this treaty started 10 years ago, and we are approaching the deadline on that. There had been hopes that the Liberal government could get that finalized before the election in the U.S., and unfortunately they were not able to do that. So we're sitting in a situation right now where that treaty continues in its current form for at least 10 more years, giving that period of time to renew the negotiations. I don't think that President Trump is going to be very amenable to that, but we will have to be patient, and we will also have to be firm and retain control of the dams on this side of the border, and absolutely be firm in our resolve that our water is ours to control. And whatever sort of actions it may take to protect that, the NDP would be willing to be part of the consortium to protect all of our waters that cross the border many, many times and in many, many places. Thank you.
Thank you. The Columbia River Treaty is actually being negotiated by the provincial government, the NDP government. So the federal government simply signs off on it afterwards. Having said that, I can't think of a better leverage right now. When I look at Arrow Lakes, the level's down. It's causing damage all along the banks. It's causing trouble for the residents all along Arrow Lake system. Meanwhile, the lakes in the United States are full. I mean, as per the treaty, and we get some for the electricity that they get from that. I think it's a good opportunity right now for the federal government to sit on that and use it as leverage in the negotiations with the United States, because quite frankly, that's something that we own and they don't. Otherwise, it's like a gnat going up against an elephant. And we have to utilize what leverage we do have. Now, I can't speak for my government. I can't speak for what I believe. And this is what I'll be pushing for. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Anderson that Canada does have quite a bit of leverage with the Columbia River Treaty because the water's up here. It hasn't always been managed to support Canadian interests. We've traded a lot of things off, a lot of painful things off, in order to get that reimbursement from the United States for the extra electricity that they generate. But I'm on an international water board for Osoyoos Lake and also for another one in the Skagit watershed to the west of Manning Park. And in my, the Osoyoos board is underneath the International Joint Commission, which oversees the Boundary Waters Treaty that goes from New Brunswick all the way into British Columbia. And this is the treaty, this is probably the most important international water treaty that we have, because it has to do with the waters that form the boundary. So the people who are working on U.S.-Canadian water issues that I'm affiliated with are more concerned about the Boundary Waters Treaty right now. than the Columbia River Treaty, because the boundary waters is like the Great Lakes, that our border goes right down through the Great Lakes. There's been a lot of talk from Mr. Trump about boundary line adjustments to give him more access to these waters. And that is something that I think is of more concern. The other thing, just quickly to the final bit, is I'm also quite concerned about the Arctic and the passage in the Arctic. Since we've had climate change, there's been a lot of ice melting, and now it's possible to get large ships and icebreakers through the Arctic. And so one of the reasons why Trump is interested in Greenland and Canada is because of the rich minerals in the Arctic and also the trade routes.
Thank you, Anna. So yeah, we'll go next. You done this?
We're done.
You're all done? Okay, thank you. So am I.
I'm happy to talk more about it.
Next speaker.
It is.
My name's Colin Moss. I'm from New Denver. My question is directed to Scott. It has to do with sovereignty, and in this case, it's the invasion of the sovereign state of Ukraine by Russia. All Canadians should be proud of the support that we've given to Ukraine since that happened. The question to you, Scott, is would the Conservative Party continue to offer that level of support, or perhaps enhance support? And you, as our Conservative MP, what would your personal position be on that?
Thanks for the question. My personal position on that is that I believe I'll tell you what. In last November, I decided I could not break through there's propaganda coming out of Russia like crazy, there's propaganda coming out of Ukraine like crazy. I didn't know what it was, what the true situation. So I actually went to Ukraine. And more than that, I went to the Eastern Front and traveled along from the north down to the south, throughout Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, every main battlefront city, and sometimes to the Zero Line. And what I saw there is an incredible outpouring of Ukrainian patriotism. Every street corner, every car had blue and yellow flying from its antenna. I didn't go there predisposed to believe the Ukrainians or the Russians, but I came away seeing what was happening there. And the Ukrainians we're told that they speak Russian, they're ethnically Russian on the Eastern Front, and therefore they belong with Russia. I found exactly the opposite. In fact, one person told a colleague of mine that we all didn't really think of ourselves as Russians or Ukrainians until the first bomb fell. And then we became Ukrainians. And you go through these cities, and these people are trying to live just like us, except the only difference is that bombs are crashing down anytime, anywhere. The Russians are not worrying about where they're fired in Ukraine. So my personal position is I very definitely want to see Ukraine defended. It's not full of Nazis. It's some of the propaganda that's so easily believed here, and some of it believed by my own colleagues who are conservatives. Unfortunately, Ukraine needs defense. I see it as the eastern border of the Western world.
Okay. I find myself in the unique position of agreeing with the Conservative candidate to my left. My family on one side hails from Ukraine, 3 generations in Odessa, and then came over to the New World through various routes. The NDP does believe in maintaining the defense of Ukraine. This is a unique position secondarily for me in that I came to Canada as an immigrant in 1967 as a pacifist, avoiding military conscription and shipping to Southeast Asia to fight. I believe in self-defense, and Ukraine I see an absolute need to support them. The NATO requirement of 2% of GDP being used for military works. Canada, among all of the NATO nations, is the only nation that does not include our spending on the Coast Guard. So the 1.7% that we do spend on military, if we added the Coast Guard in, would be 2.6%. So there's a differential there. I understand that we need to modernize and increase our military. I say this with great reluctance, and I say this with love in my heart to defend Ukraine and to defend Palestine.
This is made easier by the fact that I also agree with my colleagues. The gentleman who asked the question has a t-shirt that says, "I stand with Ukraine." And I definitely feel like that myself. The one thing that I would add is that I, for a long time, lived in Kelowna, and when the Ukrainians came over at the start of the war, they're not exactly refugees, but they're allowed to come into Canada and live and work. I was friends with a bunch of people who were helping the Ukrainians, and one thing that I would advocate for personally in government is that we get more support for people like the Ukrainians who came to Canada to help them with their settlement, because this has been a hard transition for them, and a lot of people need much more support than they're getting. Thank you.
My name is Brian Gorbachev, and I hear all parties saying they got to gain trust from the electorate. We all know that Parliament's been shut down for more than a year. It hasn't worked, so it's been taxation without representation. And I'd like to know if anyone in this panel watched the National Citizens Inquiry and your thoughts on the people that gave evidence against our government.
Okay, could I just ask a clarification here? To just a bit, Ryan. You're asking about a particular show?
Well, I'm saying that, the National Citizens Inquiry, the guy who wrote the Constitution did the National Citizens Inquiry. Thousands of Canadians testified during it. And trust for government. We haven't had a government for a year function, and you're still taxing me. And I'd just like to know if any of you watched the National Citizens Inquiry, to your thoughts on the people that testified against corruption in the government. That's why it hasn't functioned in a year, and what they had to say about their rights, their freedoms, and the trust of Canadians. I'd like to know if you watched any of the National Citizens Inquiry.
I want to apologize and say that I did not, and I am not familiar with it. So I'm sorry, and I will pass to one of my other colleagues.
Yeah, we'll just go down the line here.
Thank you.
Also, the reason I asked you, Brian, was I'm sorry, I didn't know about it either.
I was not aware of the National Citizens Inquiry either, so I really can't comment on it. But thank you for your question, and it's something that I will turn my attention to in future.
My answer is similar. It's I didn't watch it. I do understand that Western governments in general have lost the trust of Canadians. And I think it's a self-inflicted wound, frankly. I can tell you a story, for instance, about Superior Health, which is an organ of the provincial government, but it's illustrative of the trust that's lost. They, for instance, put out a pamphlet, and I'm not talking about some guy saying it, I'm talking about a glossy pamphlet saying that 97% of needles that they passed out had been recovered. Well, when I was in council, in Vernon City Council, I heard this, and I just wondered, well, how many have you given out? And IHA did not have an answer. They didn't know they knew how many their intake offices took in, but they had no idea how many they gave out. So I said, well, how can you say you recovered 97% then? And, well, that's been established, I was told. And for months and months and months, I questioned IHA every time it came to council about what happened and like how do you arrive at the 97? And they finally admitted that they just made it up. And this is the sort of thing that government has become, that they've forgotten that they serve the people, and they think that the people are to be led by them. And this is a real problem. I believe in small government. I believe that the Conservative government should set laws, things that people can't do, and butt out of for people's lives if they're living legally. That's what I believe.
No, thank you. To watch it, there's thousands of Canadians that testified. Some of us.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much for your question and for your answers. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Bart Walker. I'm from the Cusp, and Scott, being of Ukrainian descent as well, I really appreciate that you took the time and effort to actually go to Ukraine and find out what was going on. It was very brave of you, and thank you. My question is about proportional representation, and I think this election especially shows how important it would be if we changed how we elect our government, because it's just a shame that the Greens and the NDP, I'm voting Liberal, I might as well tell you, but it's just a shame that the Greens and the NDP are not going to have, So, what's your opinion, each of you?
On proportional representation. Okay, we'll start with Anne and we'll go down the road as well. The question about proportional representation. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I can't speak for the Liberal Party, but I can speak for myself. That I think that proportional representation is potentially a good idea, but to me it matters how it's structured. I can hear I'm not talking loud enough in the back. It depends on how it's structured, because one of the things that's most important to me is having a representative that is local to an area rather than a representative that is elected at large. So however it is that it was structured, it's very important that local people have a local representative that is working with them, whatever party that they are in. There's a lot of different forms of proportional representation, so I can't blanket say that I agree with all of them. This is my personal view, and not for sure the view of the Liberal Party. I don't know if the Liberal Party has a stand on proportional representation at this time. There was it was mentioned in 2015 and didn't come through at that time, but I think there's always opportunities to bring things back to the table if the people care about it, and I think that it's the role of your member of parliament to take your ideas up and bring them to government. Thank you.
The NDP absolutely and unequivocally supports the concept of proportional representation. The types of PR have been discussed, have been explained. It's not going to take years to figure that out. The Liberal government promised that 2015 would be the last first past the post, and then they reneged on that. So I have to assume that the Liberal Party's position on it is that it's a dead issue. I myself am running to prove the point that proportional representation is important. We cannot lose the third, fourth, fifth, sixth voices the way that we are losing our voice in this portion of the Vernon, Lake Country, Monashee electoral district. We have had our ears just taken away from us. This is a region that has traditionally, historically voted very strongly NDP, and now all of you are facing, what do I do? Do I vote for a Liberal who I think is going to win? Do I vote for a Conservative because I believe that's what we need? But what about the NDP? What about the Greens? What about the other parties? They deserve a place at the table. We deserve a place at the table. And so a vote for me is a vote for our voice. And I hope that you remember that.
Thank you, Scott.
we may have explained proportional representation, but there are several different models, and depending on what model we pick, because what we haven't decided is what model we're going to champion here.
That's right.
So we have to first of all do that. First past the post is not perfect. Democracy itself is not perfect, but as somebody said, it's the best of the worst. So whatever problems it has, find me another system that's better. As I want to address the idea that because this is centered in Vernon, because this riding is centered in Vernon, and I know that there's some concern out here that you're going to be forgotten. I've been out here several times over the last year. I promised people that I will be in Newcastle or somewhere along the Spokane Valley once a month at least, probably twice, to address any problems that you have. You're not forgotten out here. I've made a point of making that clear. In fact, I spend more time out here than I do in Lake Country, frankly, and Lake Country is also an addition to our riding. But they're much closer to us, and they're not feeling sort of forgotten. This may have been an NDP riding before. It's not likely to be anymore, and that's fine. You're going to be represented just fine. Thank you.
Yes, Speaker.
My name is Marshus. I own a prefab home building.
We can't hear. You have to look something.
I own a prefab home building company, and I'm wondering what your party would do to ensure that businesses like ours thrive in these small communities like the Valley here. So if you could speak to that.
Okay, specifically, prefab like wood or
Prefab wood.
Yeah. Okay, comments? Let's start that one.
I own a company too, a small business. It doesn't matter what kind of fabrication it is. It doesn't matter what kind of small business it is, but small business is being strangled. Every time I cut a paycheck to my employees, I turn around and write the same paycheck to the government. The regulation we struggle with is, and I'm sure that anybody who owns a small business knows the paperwork involved, it's just strangling. We need to cut taxation. We need to cut regulation. We need to streamline the economy and supercharge the economy. And when I talk about resource development, right now we could turn off the tap to the United States if we had the Northern Gateway Pipeline and turn it on to Asia. We wouldn't even be bothered, well, we still would be by the tariffs, but the economy would be able to keep on ticking right along if we had that. And most of you, our kids would be able to have jobs in Canada and not have to move somewhere else.
There are many different views about the economy. The NDP absolutely supports small business and medium-sized business and believes that the big players have the resources to weather the storms. They don't need our money. The subsidies that we pay the big corporations, particularly the petrochem industry, should be clawed back, should be used to support small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and workers, unionized and not. One of our platforms is taking the money from the countervailing tariffs that we have put in place, using that money to support first the workers, second the smaller businesses, third the medium-sized businesses. That is the shot in the arm that we would offer to the economy, especially in small areas like this.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the prefab home building business because the Mark Carney and the Liberal Party's platform explicitly considers having increasing the development of prefabricated homes using Canadian wood, Canadian fiber, in order as part of the Building Canadian Homes program to rapidly accelerate home building across Canada. So the beauty about prefabricated homes, as many of you may know, is that you can build them as pieces, you can build them in small communities, you can build them in workshop spaces, and you can ship them through the community on a big truck like a wagon truck and out to where they need to be created. So it's a great made in Canada option with great potential to use our local materials. So I'm excited about it, and you're lucky you're in that business right now.
Yeah, that's
My name's Mike Casper, I live in Slopine Park. A lot of us know that huge government means huge tyranny. I just want to state a fact that since 2015, the Liberals have had increased the size of the public service by 43% to 110,000 people. That's more than double the growth rate of the Canadian population. I want to know what you're specifically going to do for me as a citizen to make government smaller.
Thank you very much for your question. We're going to start with Leah this time, and Anna, and Scott will finish up.
What we're going to do to make government more effective is to continue and expand the pharmacare program, continue and expand universal health care, continue and expand $10 a day daycare, continue and expand the school lunch program, continue and expand dental care for seniors and then successively for younger people. The magic bullet is not to have less government. The magic bullet is to have effective government. There are many programs in the government that keep us safe. And those jobs are good jobs that support families and that give the incentive for the private companies to try to match those earnings for their people. I'm not in favor of just blanket saying small government, cut, and I don't want to pay taxes. I am of the opinion that I want my taxes to be used to support all of us.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, just first an observation. When I moved to Vernon in 2006, it was the beginning of a program by Stephen Harper to drastically cut the public civil service. So working in water and water management, the way that I saw it was the Water Survey of Canada that had many water monitoring stations throughout British Columbia where they were measuring stream flows, they were measuring snowpack, they were looking at the weather stations. These went from 100 in the Okanagan Valley to 25. Similarly, they gutted the staff of the Water Survey of Canada program. It got really difficult to find anybody on the other end of the telephone because so many staff had either been retired or lost through attrition or just had their jobs cut out of the program. What you're seeing in many ways with the growth of the civil service is the replacement of those jobs that were lost under the Harper government. That being said, I hear you, I understand, I feel that it's important to only have the right positions that are needed. We don't need to have a whole lot of middle management. We need to have really excellent science technicians in the fields of healthcare, people who can help us. We didn't like it when there was long passport lines because there wasn't enough passport employees to help us. I think a lot of the problem that you're talking about is also going to be solved naturally, if you will, because a lot of the more ordinary tasks that people are doing, you might call bureaucratic things that people are doing, are being replaced by AI. And it's just a movement that can't be held back. There's going to be less positions in the civil service just because that so much more of that work is being done by AI.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, we've seen what the Liberals do, and they've doubled the size of the civil service just about. And we've seen what the NDP will do on a provincial level. They've expanded the civil service as well. And I guess I just ask, does anybody feel better 10 years later? Do you feel like you're farther ahead 10 years later? Everybody that feels better, raise your hand. A little less than half. Okay.
Thank you. That was a very important question. Next speaker.
name is Sherry. I'm from Vermont. I'm going to preempt my questions so nobody
No, excuse me, Sherry, just a second.
Okay, I'm going to preempt my questions so that nobody misunderstands. My family came from England, so they were immigrants. So I understand immigration, but I think our immigration in this country has run amok. We don't have the infrastructure, we don't have housing, nor do we have the job. It took me 350 plus resumes to find a job. So I want to know from each of you how we're going to handle the immigration crisis in this country.
Yeah, I agree. Although we would absolutely need immigration in this country because we aren't making babies fast enough to replace ourselves in our workforce. We need more doctors rapidly. We need more nurses. We need more care aides. We need more construction workers. There's so many different types of skilled workers that we need to come to Canada. And we have the opportunity to welcome people with the best educations from the best parts of the world in order to do that. However, as you say, immigration has been going too rapidly, and this is why Mark Carney has said he's going to cap the rate of immigration so that it's slowed down enough so that we can catch up with our services, like we're talking about the Ukrainians. We need to be able to take care of the people that we allow in here, and so that we can catch up with our housing, because the housing is a shortage for everyone. Everywhere in Canada, there's a housing shortage, and we 100% need to catch up to that before we allow, an increased rate of immigration. Thank you.
Well, the Conservative Party has promised to have a policy of sustainable immigration. The Liberal Party has done, amazingly, they seem to have changed the tune, but only usually as soon as the Conservative Party drops the platform, the Liberals pick it up. This is what the problem is. And Mark Carney was actually the advisor while immigration went up. So I don't know how he's come to the realization we need it. As for doctors and caregivers, the Conservative Party has said, look, we have them here. There's a fellow, in fact, there was a doctor that was referenced by Pierre the other day, who works as a technician here because he's a doctor, but he can't get the license to work. So what he does is he goes back to South Africa, does surgeries, and then comes back to Canada and acts as a technician. And he's got all the skills, but the red tape that's involved in becoming a Canadian doctor is outrageous.
I totally agree.
And so,
Totally agree.
well, unfortunately, the Liberal Party didn't agree yesterday, though. That's the problem. So, yeah, we need a sustainable immigration, but we need to cut through some of the red tape that is holding back Canada. It's so easy to do. It just has to be done. Thank you.
More that you would think differently about the red tape when it comes to holding agencies accountable. If there's no traceability of what they have done, which is what red tape is, then there's no accountability. I agree that the immigration situation is crazy, absolutely crazy. There are so many pieces to it. Yes, we need doctors, nurses, lab technicians, X-ray technicians, engineers, et cetera, et cetera. And we do need to look at how we move from having provincial territorial separate licensing and have national licensing for those things that are important to us.
I totally agree.
But what about the agricultural? What about the agricultural temporary workers? That if they don't pick the crops, if they don't process the chickens, etc., just like in the U.S., where those people are being deported, and that is part of why produce costs are going up, if you can even get produce. We need to look at every aspect of it, and our temporary foreign workers deserve a path to citizenship, just like other immigrants. it's a big, multifaceted octopus that we need to tame. And the NDP is committed to taming it. It's not going to be overnight. The Liberals have some good ideas. Even the Conservatives have some good ideas. Forgive me. But we do need to work together, and we do need to look at all the different pieces. Thank you.
Thank you for the question and for your answers. Yeah. The next speaker.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes. Good. He's smart. I would have done it, but he did it first. I'm Monashee, and I'm from Valakan, where the Valakan Hole Community Center is, which I had a big hand in building. And I believe in community. I believe in the communities in this valley who have built so well in so many ways. And I have a question for Scott, because in your introduction, you were talking about cutting waste. And Leah was talking about the things that we value and that we want to increase our, health care, dental care, Medicare, etc., the things that support the communities. So I'm quite interested to hear what you think is waste.
What is waste? It could be a loaded question. Not a loaded Scott.
Well, I mean, I could start with a whole bunch of different programs. The gun registry, for instance, we're talking about almost $1 billion into it. And so far it's going, they pulled back the gun grabs that they're doing. I could list.
Please, go right ahead.
Excuse me. Everybody's been great so far. This is really good. An amazing conversation here. But the question has been asked, so okay, we need to let Scott answer.
Yeah, I can't give you a list of them. But I think everybody here understands that there is waste in government, outrageous waste in government. Blowing up the civil service and doubling it is not necessary. Community exists, and healthcare is very important. It's not being run efficiently right now at all. I think everybody understands that. That's not a federal jurisdiction, but there are federal transfers that go with it. I think we need a leaner government. Community exists by itself. It doesn't need government intrusion to make it work. If you're talking about community, the sense of community in fact, I would argue that without government, it would be community has easier time growing without that sort of thing. So I can certainly supply you a list of billions of dollars of waste. I should have probably brought a list. I don't have a list. I will have a list next time. You betcha.
So the list is on the way, Marsha. Okay, next, you get 1 minute. Dave?
Sure, there's waste. A lot of waste is just stuff that we haven't figured out how to reuse. And that goes for programs as well as for products. Many of the buildings in our communities and many of the societies and organizations in our communities exist robustly because they were supported by grants. And you know what the waste is that we have to spend so much time writing grant proposals instead of doing the work. The biggest waste in the federal government is the application process for grants for communities instead of it being an allocation that communities get automatically. They can thrive, they can use it to support the things that are important to that community. Sure, application programs also have a place in building, rebuilding, replacing our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
totally agree with Leah about the onerous grant application process and how difficult it is, especially with federal grants, as you would know from your history with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. All respect. The thing that I'm concerned about when the Conservative government talks about cutting government and cutting unnecessary programs is I do not want any cuts to the universal health care. I do not want to privatize health care. Privatizing health care. I lived in California, and I found that privatized health care, what it actually did is it suppressed entrepreneurship, because if you're an entrepreneur and you have to figure out how all your employees are going to pay for health care, it stopped people from changing jobs. It stopped people from starting companies. It's something that we don't talk about very much, is the unintended benefits of it.
Yeah, next speaker.
My name is Jim Barrell from Spokane Park, and I am here to thank you for coming, all three of you, and being here, and so we can actually hear what you have to say on our behalf. Thank you. My question is to all of you on the subject of government efficiency. When I hear that topic being said, I automatically think of what's going on in the United States with privatization of all these sacred policies that we have in place as Canadians that we appreciate. We appreciate our publicly owned water, air, space, our CBC, the voice of the people. My question is to the three of you, if the CBC and healthcare and those kinds of inefficiencies, if you like, are cut by the Conservative Party and to supercharge the economy, what does everybody at that table feel that is the outcome to a supercharged economy and a trimmed down government?
Yeah. Thank you. I'll give you all just a second to think about this. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So Jim, you're asking for people to project.
How does a supercharged economy and a trimmed down government look to the three of you?
Okay, thank you. And on this one, I'm going to go Leah, Scott, and Ann. And here.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I get to be the ratings socialist. Not for which reason, voice of vision. A supercharged economy is an economy out of control. The control is needed to protect the environment, to protect our social programs, to protect communities, because a supercharged economy without restraint would be driving lanes right through communities, because that's the quickest way to get from here to there. I'm not in favor of that. I also think that a trimmed down civil service leads to nightmare situations where, try to call Revenue Canada and get them to help you solve a problem with your tax returns. If there are not enough people at the end of those phones, you will wait forever. This is it's a situation that we need to look at and go, what is the greater good and how do we serve that greater good? We do have to have some restraints on the economy. Capitalism feeds billionaires. It doesn't feed workers. We need to restrain that.
Yeah, Scott?
Okay, first of all, I want to, has anybody tried to call me Revenue Canada lately? You're going to wait an awful long time on the phone before you get them. The red herrings that we keep hearing, privatized healthcare. Nobody in the Conservative Party has talked about privatizing healthcare. It just hasn't happened. It's not there. You can laugh. No, they haven't. Nobody in the Conservative Party is talking about giving our sovereignty away. Nobody's doing it. So these are sort of put out there as red herrings to scare people into, oh no, we can't vote Conservative. It's just silly. It's like a lot of things that are being thrown out there that nobody in the Conservative Party has talked about. I mean, a supercharged economy doesn't mean that everybody's doing everything and rushing, throwing highways through everything. It simply means that everybody has jobs. Is there something wrong with that? That everybody has a job? Or that most people have a job? Because I don't think so. Anyway, in real life, I think that a supercharged economy means we take advantages of the things that we can take advantage. We cut the red tape. We allow people to get jobs. It's for our kids more than anything else, so that they have a chance to stay here in Canada. That's why we're doing this.
When I hear you say government efficiency, I immediately think of Elon Musk holding his giant chainsaw with his, mirror glasses on, making a spectacle of cutting Medicaid and Social Security and other social programs. I have a lot of friends who are working in water science in the U.S. They're cutting the National Weather Service and taking something that's publicly owned, and the public still pays for the data collection, but if you want to know what the weather is, you're going to have to pay for it from the company who's taking that data. There are a lot of problems with this phrase government efficiency, and it does not necessarily correlate with the supercharged economy. I think that is like a false pairing, false equivalency. And what we actually need is we need to take care of people while we're taking care of the economy. You can't just sort of say a buzzword like, Department of Government Efficiency and actually make sure that it's all efficient. I mean, they fired workers who were in charge of nuclear waste management. Nobody wants that. So I just think we should, not just dash recklessly into some kind of idealistic future of if we cut all the government, everything will be hunky-dory. No, we still need roads, we still need schools, we still need hospitals, we still need all kinds of services. We need passports. We even, God forbid, we even need Revenue Canada.
Thank you for your question. Next.
My name is Rita Moyer. I'm from Valakan in the Lower Spokane Valley. In the whole issue with the 51st state, elbows up, all that kind of thing, in our question of sovereignty, it's also our cultural sovereignty, and for me, cultural sovereignty also includes women's abortion rights, LGBTQ rights, diversity, equity, all of those human rights have fought for, and all the cultures have fought for. I would like from each person up here your absolute, unequivocal commitment to abortion rights for women, for LGBTQ plus rights, and that you will not pander to the religious right that has taken over the Conservative Party, the Republican Party in the U.S., because it can happen here, and I want your commitment to those issues.
Okay, third question will go Scott, Anna, and Leah. Scott.
Nobody in the Conservative Party has mentioned abortion except to say that no bill will be coming forward regarding abortion in the next term. That was what Pierre said. Nobody is talking about LGBT rights at all. Nobody's going to take away any rights. In fact, I spent about an hour on the phone with a fellow who was gay who called me and said, I'm a conservative. And I've got some friends who are so scared of all their rights being taken away, and I tried to talk to them about what are they going to do to take away your rights? When has anybody ever said anything about that? This is another one of those red herrings that the Liberal Party puts out there and says that, oh, if you elect the Conservatives, this is what's going to happen.
I'm not a Liberal Party, I'm a citizen.
Okay, it's just,
Yeah, I get it.
okay, it doesn't matter. This government is not, the Conservative government is not going to take away any rights of abortion or LGBTQ or anything else. It just isn't.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Anne.
Thank you for your question. I can totally unequivocally affirm that I support a woman's right to choose and LGBTQ plus rights. And not just that, just our whole principles of multiculturalism as well is a really important Canadian value. Reconciliation is an important Canadian value. They all have to do with Canadian culture. Who are we? We are a country of immigrants. We're people who came from Ukraine, from India, from England, from all over the world, and there was these great cultures who were here as First Canadians. So I think there's so many aspects to Canadian culture that I am also concerned about if we are even over-influenced by what's going on in the United States. Because we do not want to have restrictions on any of our freedoms. We do not want to have that kind of anger and division coming from the United States into Canada. We need to fight for our unity, and we need to fight for our culture. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
There's absolutely no question in my mind that I commit to preserving the rights of 2S LGBTQ plus persons, to women's right to choose, to families' rights to be whatever conglomeration of people they choose to be and live in love. I will not tolerate stepping backward. I've been fighting for these rights since before I even came to Canada. And I will continue to fight for them. And I will continue to fight for expanded access to abortions, to family planning, because these services are becoming more and more rare and harder to access. I also support MAID. It obviously needs a lot of scrutiny, a lot of talk in the families, but ultimately it's a person's choice. If they're done, they're done. And we don't have the right to keep them hanging on in pain and anxiety. So I commit absolutely to protecting these sorts of rights.
Yes, excuse me, sir. You're from Winlock?
Yes, Gary, I am.
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Kurt Gibbons, and I had the honor of getting to sit up there for 25 years. Thank you, Gary, for doing this, and thank each of you for your willingness to put up with our communities of nature.
So far.
I got to run for office prior to the invention of social media and the sort of polarity and troublesome behavior of the modern day. And I think there's a lot of people that are afraid to run for office now, given the nature of the times. And my question of all of you is, what is it in your heart or your ambition or your values that made you brave enough to sit on that side of the table and answer our questions?
Yes, that's
a good one.
I think there's Anna Scott in the Where are you finding the courage to do this now?
I have to tell you, Corky, I do not know what came over me. It was this great tide of patriotism, really. That's the only way that I can describe it. I felt like I was called I felt like this is a time in our country that none of us ever expected. It is frightening. It is nerve-wracking. We don't know what's going to happen next. We know that we have a lot of problems internally into our country, but we're having, in the middle of trying to work out things with the inflation and all these other things going on. Now we're being, crushed, or they're trying to crush us economically in other ways. I just felt cold. It's like when a guy, you have that stereotype of the guy who runs off to join the army. That was my emotional state when I couldn't help myself. Sometimes you have to step up. That's what I thought. I had to. Someone asked, and suddenly I found I couldn't say no. Yeah.
Scott, nice to see you. Yeah, go with Scott.
Well, I'm not a newcomer to politics. I think I was in grad school in Winnipeg a long time ago, and I ran into a campaign, and I decided that politics is where I was, and I stopped going to class, and my professors were very understanding, fortunately. But I threw my whole heart and soul into this campaign, and I've been involved in politics ever since. I think there are two of us here who actually have been elected before. I was elected first as a city councillor in Vernon, and I was re-elected again for a second term. I think what I found as a city councillor is that I was uniquely gifted with the idiocy to be able to raise my hand, and with 6 of my peers going in one direction saying, let's go in a different direction. And being able to take the slings and arrows that came my way for that, it didn't bother me that much, because I really believed that when I raised my hand, I did it for a reason, and that we really needed to change direction. And oddly enough, most of the time, the rest of the city council were kind of on board, or at least ambivalent about the direction they were going on, and I was able to change that direction. Way back in the 90s, I was fortunate enough to be able to go from grad school to Ottawa, where I was a legislative assistant. And I swore that when I go back there, I would do it when I have a platform to use as an MP. And so I really hope that you can elect me so that I can go back and really make change and raise my hand when I have to and change the direction of politics. Thank you.
It will come as no surprise to anyone that I have been political since I was about 12 years old. I was part of the civil rights movement in the United States in the early 60s. I was part of the war resistance during the Vietnam War in the States, and I immigrated to Canada, as I said, in 1967. One of the attractions of Canada was that coming from a nation as big as the United States, where one voice could never be heard, I came to Canada, and it was like, wow, one person has a voice in this country, because the country's small enough that it'll hear your voice. Politics, to me, is community building. Also, it's no surprise that I lived in communes for several years on hippie farms, which is where I first learned about agriculture and about regenerative agriculture and about systems that work together. Community building. I've served on Silverton Council since 2009, on the regional district since 2011, and I served 10 years on the board of directors of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, where we got to work as local government to work with federal government to design programs and funding models that would help communities, local governments of all sizes, build the infrastructure and supply the supports that they needed to supply to their people. I was having a conversation with our former NDP MP, Richard Cannings, and he said, "Why don't you run?" And I said, "Well, why don't I?" So here I am. I felt it was really important for the NDP to have a voice in this new riding. It would have been a shame to let This election fell with no independent candidate.
Thank you for your answer, and thank you for the question coming from someone who has been there himself. Next.
Gary, I typed it up to make sure it's under a minute.
Oh, good, because I'm watching really close. Like, okay.
I'm Theron from Spokane. My question draws from the economic insights of Bernard Lietaer, who championed the resilience of complementary currencies, and also Eleanor Ostrom, whose Nobel-winning research on commons governance inspires local stewardship models. In rural communities like ours here in the Spokane Valley, we see wealth and productivity continually extracted, flowing out to banks, corporations, and now speculative global crypto systems. While these systems promise decentralization, many act more like Ponzi schemes than public goods. In contrast, we could be using community-driven crypto tools designed to serve local needs, with the potential to protect our economies, insulate small businesses from corporate control, and reinforce our local networks. My question for all three of you is, how will your party recognize the role that diverse, scale-appropriate monetary systems can play, especially in rural and remote regions of Canada, as we move into a digitally dominated post-US dollar economic future?
We're going to start with Scott, then Leah, and Anna. Okay, and our question, of course, is definitely in favor of cryptocurrency. So, using it in some way, what are your feelings about it?
I'm not entirely sure your question was about cryptocurrency necessarily as a concept. It's more how it can be utilized. In order to answer your question, I'd have to read an awful lot more about that. My background is in strategic studies. It is political studies, but it's international relations and strategic studies. I would welcome to be able to read an academic paper on it so that I could answer your question.
I'll send you one.
Good. Please do. I'm serious. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to strip it down into easier terms. In the mid-1980s, in the Silverton, New Denver, Roseberry Hills area, a number of us got together and did an experiment in a local currency bank that ran for about 2 years. In the 1980s, this was before we had the internet and all of its benefits and detriments. It was really interesting to constantly be addressing with our members the different questions of how to value different types of work, whether to value them differently or not. So I am familiar with local currencies, local economies. The trick now is to bridge from each local currency or economy how to network with the other ones to develop regional food sheds, regional economic sheds, regional forestry management sheds. And so I really appreciate what you're saying, and there's new tools, there are new terms, and it's really hard to keep up with all of it. And as a politician, having to field questions about all kinds of things, sometimes it just makes my head spin. And I think I understand what you said, and I think that I have been part of it and would like to see it recur and grow in all of our communities.
I'm not actually familiar with small-scale digital currencies. I'm a little sketched out by some of the big ones and how they're managed and handled and the amount of electricity that they require.
Yes.
That being said, like Leah, there's many kinds of regional, local ways that in the history of humans we have determined different scripts and goods and bartering systems, and perhaps even this as a sort of a 21st century way that you can have a local economy with local exchanges. This is just what I'm guessing. Yeah. Okay. She's nodding. Everybody. I think we have to look at all the different solutions because these communities, we need more economic growth in rural areas. We need to find ways that we can help each other, reinforce each other, stimulate business, bring back localization of products. Growing up in Caslow, and there was mills in every single one of these towns. Now, you see logs shipped out of Port Alberni. We need to have more local industries, more local products, more ways to exchange with each other. So I welcome a discussion with you about how local crypto fits into that, but literally, never heard of it.
Thank you very much for your question and for your honest answers. We are committed to ending at 9 o'clock. I want to give the candidates time to speak at the end. So I think we have time to get to all the 5 speakers who are in line right now. So why don't we go through them and we'll see where we're at.
My name is Jasmine Finley. I'm from Vernon. And over the last 10 years, under the Liberal government, the lack of planning and the lack of infrastructure building has put our Canadian economy in a perilously vulnerable position, especially regarding the wildly unpredictable influence our neighbors to the south have on our economy. So my question is to Scott. I'm curious to hear more about what a Conservative government would do to responsibly develop our industries and our ability to be more self-reliant and independent stability as an economy of Canada.
Scott?
Thanks for the question. To do anything would be an improvement over right now. If we have the Northern Gateway pipeline, one of the safest, and I was deeply involved in this when it was proposed over 10 years ago. It's one of the safest pipelines in the world. It was double walled. Whenever it came near water, it could shut itself off if there was a leak detected. It had cameras floating up and down the line the entire time. It is less dangerous to do that than it is to train to use rail to move oil. And that's what's being done right now. There's just so much hype over pipelines that they're going to explode and flood everything. And that's simply, it was the case maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It is not the case now. What we need to do is, and when I say supercharge the economy, this is not like an engine running without a governor and just, rah, like this. This is the cartoonization of what the Conservative Party is subject to right now. All sorts of red herrings. When my colleague is talking about cutting in the States, that's the United States. That's not Canada. And so we can talk about Botswana or we can talk about Ethiopia. It has nothing to do with Canada. Canada is Canada. No, it's not whatever. It is. You're talking about taking a chainsaw and you're talking about Elon Musk with beard glasses. That has nothing to do with Conservatives, or it has nothing to do with Canada. We're on the same page as far as sovereignty goes. So what we need to do is responsibly open mines, which are just about impossible to open because they're tangled up in red tape. We need to build pipelines. The Conservative Party proposes a corridor through Canada that is pre-approved so that we just bring people in to construct the pipeline itself. Because they don't need to spend 10, 20 years figuring out how to do it.
Yeah, totally agree that we need to build infrastructure. 100%, we need to invest in Canada. One of the number one reasons why we need to build an infrastructure corridor across Canada, which is part of the Liberal Party's platform, is so that we can have energy independence from the United States. Right now, and we are shipping so much of our energy to the United States, we're dependent on them as buying it. There's also issues with, we have all this Canadian oil and gas, and Quebec is bringing up tankers of it from Saudi Arabia. we need to get better at using Canadian energy within Canada. Another part of that infrastructure corridor that's part of the Liberal plan is giant grids to carry the electricity as we build out our green energy infrastructure. One of the things I'm excited about with green energy is someone told me in Alberta that Alberta is the Saudi Arabia of solar and wind power. And one of the limitations, of course, of solar and wind is that it is intermittent, but if we link it to BC's hydro dams, and we have a strong enough grid, then we can have everything we want.
Right on.
I heard the question quite differently than either of my colleagues. Maybe it's because I spent 10 years working on infrastructure funding for local governments, which is a big can of worms. Out of every dollar of taxes collected in Canada, local governments get 8 to 10 cents. Yet we are directly responsible for 60% of the infrastructure. That's a real trick to build and maintain our infrastructure on pennies. The federal government, of whatever stripe it winds up being, has got to come to the table and listen to local governments that say we need dependable, reliable funding, permanent funding so that we can build and maintain our infrastructure.
Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Rodriguez, and people keep telling me that throughout the last government, the NDP, being a minority in parliament, basically upheld, supported, and became a puppet of the Liberals. I have a question just for you. If this riding trusts you and sends you to parliament, and you find yourself one of the very few NDP voices in a sea of Liberals and Conservatives, what can you do? What difference can you make there?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the NDP government did agree to support the Liberal government in exchange for very specific programs: pharmacare, dental care, school lunches, anti-scab legislation, $10 a day daycare. Those were wins for the NDP, and we felt that it was worthwhile to collaborate with the Liberals in order to get those programs started. It is, we felt, highly unlikely that the Liberal government would have done that without the NDP fighting them and supporting them. When I am your MP, I will make every effort to work with my other NDP colleagues, to work with not only the government in power, but whoever is the opposition as well. A government that talks amongst itself is way more effective than a government that everybody stays in their own corner and throws darts at each other. We're having a little bit of give and take up here tonight. That's the purpose of a forum. But when it comes time to govern, you have to talk to everybody who's involved in that process, from the voters, the citizens, the residents, the temporary foreign workers, your colleagues, the MPs, and your MLAs and other territorial and provincial representatives, and Indigenous peoples. The fourth part of our stool of government: local, provincial, territorial, federal, and Indigenous. And we will get nowhere unless and until we talk to everyone.
Thank you, Anna and Scott. You're good? Okay.
I happen to agree with Leah. In a minority government, The NDP, the only voice they had was the leverage that they had to make it a majority government. So in order for the Liberal government to stay in power in the last term, they depended on the NDP. And the NDP was able to use that leverage, and I think they're getting an unfair deal, frankly, because I think that they did exactly what they should have done. They got programs. I may not agree with the programs, but in a political sense, they did exactly what they should have done in that government. Again, I don't agree with what they did do, and I hope that a conservative government can undo some of it, to make it more efficient. But I think they've had a raw deal.
I just quickly want to say that I do like those programs. I wasn't there, I wasn't part of it, but I'm glad to see the pharmacare and the dental care and the $10 a day child care. So, however it came to pass, I'm very pleased to have those for all Canadian citizens.
Okay. Other comments? Yes. Do I have time? Thank you for 2 more questions.
My name is Evelyn Goodell. I'm from Hills. And my question is for Scott. You're the leader of the Conservatives uses the word woke. And in order for us to understand what he means by that, could you give us specific examples in 2 areas where he's used it? He says he wants to take the woke out of the military, and though doesn't want the universities to study woke subjects. So could you give us specific examples so we can understand what he means by that?
What is woke? Scott?
I'm not going to try to answer for the leader of the party. I have no idea. What I will say is that the purpose of the military is to fight. It is not to be a minor sort of experiment. It's not supposed to reflect the civilians. I spent 10 years in the military. It's supposed to break things. That's what it's supposed to do. We've used it for peacekeeping. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. We've used it in wartime, and that's what it's supposed to do. I think you had another example. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's talked about making it so that universities cannot do research in woke subjects, and I don't know what he means by that.
I don't know what he means by that either. What I can say is that
Can you take a guess, maybe?
Well, no, not really. I'm not going to take a guess. What I will say is that when I went to school back in the 90s, the ethos in university was to be able to debate subjects. And it was just breaking into some of the faculties which no longer encourage debate. What they do is encourage indoctrination. There are several subjects like that do that. I fortunately missed that period. I went back recently to UBC, but I was working under a thesis advisor, so it's a little different than in university. But I'm aware that some faculties simply push an agenda and they do not encourage liberal debate. See, I was taught, here's a thesis, here's a Marxian thesis, here's a liberal international thesis. And they all have different points, and we're supposed to sort of know them all and then make our own decision as to what they are. In some faculties, that's not an option anymore. There's a certain there's a certain way of people talking that pushes a single agenda. That's what I think is going on, what he's talking about.
Questions about woke?
I just have to say that the faculties I'm familiar with are biology, where I didn't see anything unusual. Although there's a lot of talk about genetics and gender in biology. And the other thing was I'm on the Dean's Advisory Council for the Faculty of Applied Science, which includes the engineering schools at UBC and UBC Okanagan. And very few politics involved in that, except for how can we get more funding for more engineering seats.
Thank you.
I'm not an academic, So I get to say stuff and nonsense. We need to be able to explore, discuss, and employ people of all persuasions, genders, sexes, ethnicities, in the military as well as in the universities. If the military is going to remain traditional and have only white men in it, then it's not capable of understanding the society that they need to defend. So the military needs to be open to all people who can pass the physical and intellectual tests, period. Universities must be free to explore all topics, woke or not.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it comes to that time when we have time for one more question before we wrap it up. Okay, and the lucky speaker is
Don Broughton from Silverton. I've heard all parties talk a lot about energy. It scares me when they keep saying fast track. They talk about too much regulation. I firmly believe that our quest for all the energy, all the electricity and whatnot is killing the planet quite quickly. And destroy us by heating the water on the way to the ocean. We don't talk about, never hear it talked about in the government about maybe ocean warming is caused by that. People say we need all this. Sorry, I say it's want. And our ancestors are proof that we do not need it all. I have a great granddaughter who I want to see I want to make sure her grandkids, great grandkids have a planet. Will any of you commit to going, although it's not your party platforms, but going back to Ottawa and saying, look, we have to slow this down. We have to save and protect the planet. 4 things are needed for life: air, water, food, and a planet to be able to use all that on. Thank you.
I think it's only fitting that our last question is about everything. And please, we'll start with Leah, Scott, and then Hannah.
Thanks for the question, Don, and thanks for the explanatory behind it. You live in the same community as I do, and I know that you live a modest lifestyle, that you garden, that you keep chickens, that you recycle things, you compost. That's pretty common in rural areas. And what's also common in rural areas is that we are closest to the land, we are closest to the water, we are closest to the ways that energy is produced. We lost a lot of farmland when the Columbia River dams went in. And we have these reservoirs now that we call lakes that used to be farmland. We do need to slow down and look at what we're doing and figure out the best way to do it that does not destroy the planet. The other push that we have driving that, and I don't know how to deal with this, I'll say it right away, even though I worked for Planned Parenthood when I was 18 years old. We are on a planet that is highly overpopulated, unless you want to look at lifestyles that have absolutely nothing to do with anything natural produced by the planet. We would have to develop an entirely artificial lifestyle, politics, economy, society, in order to adequately feed, house, and clothe the billions of people on the planet now and the explosion of greater population coming. So it's, I don't know the answers to that. I do think it's incumbent on all of us to step back and live slightly less consumptive lifestyles. I'll say that everything I'm wearing is secondhand or gifted. So I'm doing my part, despite the hair color. Thank you.
Scott, okay.
Okay, I think it's not a zero-sum game. I think there is a balance between. I mean, we could look at our ancestors. Well, our ancestors, depending on how far you go back, got to 35. A 50-year-old was an old person. There are a lot of us that would be dead if our ancestors were running the world like our ancestors did. That's just the way it is. We need a balance between our air and water. Obviously, we need air and water. Nobody's talking about taking away air and water. Nor are we talking about ruining air and water. But to simply say, go back and live hand to mouth like our ancestors did is not the solution. It's just not the solution. Thank you.
Yeah, we're at about 9 billion people on the planet, which is a lot. I think that the electricity transition is actually going to make our lives a lot better. It's going to be cleaner. It's going to not contribute to climate change. I'm surprised climate change hasn't come up more today. But I think some of the promise of the new technologies and things that are coming with the green energy transition is a possibility for distributed grid, so you could have a local area, any one of your communities could have locally generated electricity so that there was more stability in the local grid, and when the power ran out in a neighboring community, it might not go out anymore. There's many ways to collect electricity. Solar panels are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Wind power is becoming better and better and better. There's all different kinds of technology going into storage and other ways to generate electricity. I personally embrace the green energy transition. We're not getting there right away. We're going to need to use our oil and gas for things that it can only be used for, but I think right now, given the size of our planet, given our energy needs, given our, desires to live well, I just turned 60. I still feel young. I'm not ready to go. So like Scott said, we want to maintain our lives and our family lives as we go and grow old with our grandchildren. Thank you.
For those of you who still have questions, I thank you very much for standing in line for so long. But we do need to get to the closing remarks. If I could, candidates, you might have a few extra minutes after this, just before you have to head out, and you might want to ask your questions to them. Okay? Thank you very much. And sorry we couldn't get to everything. Well, you've done a great job tonight, I think, as far as getting through a lot of questions. For closing statements, I'm told everybody has 2 minutes, and we'll go in reverse order of the way we started. Hopefully you can remember what that was. I'm not sure. Okay. Well, Scott, if you want to go first, we'll just run down the line this way. I think that worked out. Okay, first of all, your candidate for Conservative, Dave Barright, Scott Anderson.
Thank you. I went way over last time to introduce myself, so I'm going to try to stay under that this time. Right now, our national debt is $1.4 trillion. And just to illustrate this, and some of you have heard this before, if you, 1 million seconds is 11.5 days. That's what it is. 1 billion is 30 seconds is 32 years. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years. That's just to give a scale of what that is. And that means all of us, all our kids are going to be paying for this almost forever, unless we stop spending like this. We cannot keep doing it. Because if we do, we're simply dooming the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that to poverty. That's what we're doing right now. The Liberal government, it seems to have seen the light, almost like Paul in the Word of Tharsis. And I'm not a good Christian. I don't go to church very much at all. I think the last time I went was 3 years ago, at Christmas Eve. So when I use that phrase, it's not because I'm some sort of fundamentalist, this sort of nonsense. If we keep the Liberal government in power, it's the same government. They've changed long enough, they've changed their ideas long enough to have an election. But I don't trust for a second that the day after the election, things will change right back to exactly the same thing that Carney has been advising Trudeau to do for 10 years.
Amen.
So it's the same government, it's the same wasteful, scandal-ridden, gaslighting government that's here. And I'm afraid that we're using the boogeyman next door who's stopped talking about the 51st state, he's stopped talking about taking over Canada. He's not going to take over Canada. Nobody here is going to let him. Nobody here wants to be in the United States. People are going to wake up if they elect a Liberal government, look back and say, oh, what did we do? So that, I'm afraid, is what may happen if you elect a Liberal government. Please consider the Conservatives. We're not going to supercharge the economy so that everybody's running around like crazy. This is all red herring stuff that nobody except the opposition is talking about. Thank you.
In interest of fair process here, I guess everybody else gets an extra 14 seconds. Thank you. Okay. To wrap up for the NDP, Leah Main.
Thank you all for coming out tonight, for your questions, for listening, just for being here. I think most of you know me in some sense. I've been a public person pretty much the whole time that I've lived in the Spokane Valley. I moved here in 1971, I think. I've been here a long time. I've supported myself in whatever way I could, including by being a musician, which meant I worked 2 jobs. Yeah, you know me. I know this valley. I know the human scale of living that we've adopted here. And that is the ethos that I want to bring to the rest of the constituency and take to Ottawa. Real people, real lives, real problems, real dirt, real water. We have so many things to deal with. I've been working on the federal scale for 10 years through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I've had discussions with many of the sitting MPs. Government's going to change. It's going to look different. It's going to have a bunch of different people in it. I'm used to working at that scale. And I would really, really love to bring the Spokane Valley to Ottawa. You've heard my answers to questions tonight. Most of you know me in some iteration of the rainbow life that I've lived here. And I really would like your support. I thank you for coming out tonight. God bless.
And you have the evening course of your Liberal candidate and award series.
Thank you, and thanks to my fellow panelists for joining me in this spirited conversation. Unless things change radically in the next 2 weeks, Mark Carney will be forming government. So it's your choice. It's the choice of the people of Vernon, Lake Country, Monashee, if you want to have a representative and a voice at the decision-making table. I hope that I have shown you tonight that I can respect and listen to the voices from different parties and different people with different opinions and different walks of life. So this election is about the kind of future that we want to choose. And I'm ready to help build it with you. So please vote for me and Warwick Sears, Mark Carney, and the Liberal Party of Canada on April 28th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Just before we go, I'd like to again thank Valley Voices Chamber of Commerce, Dave, Steve, Phil for all their help. Steve and Phil. Steve, Bill. I'm trying to talk fast, and all I do is mumble. Okay. Anyhow, thank you all very much for coming out, and I think you've heard from our candidates tonight that if you join me, I wish we could send all three. That would be really nice.
You think so? Not sure. Not sure. But
Yeah, she
Did you record this?
Venus been doing it.
Okay.
I'm just standing here.
Oh,
So it
it's
doesn't get
live.
gravel.
Okay.
Yeah, so it will be available.
Yeah, excellent, because it was our council meeting night tonight. So we missed,
Yeah. Well,
and our meeting was so quiet. Everybody was here. Yeah. Amazing. Thanks, Vita.
yeah, I'll pass it on.
I'm Laura. I just saw you in the car. You're going to do something.
Yes.
Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I guess I should turn it off now, eh? How do you?